advanced and that they have been dealing with this situation. At present, about 88 million gallons of water per day is sent to South Trinidad, and around 89 million gallons of water a day is sent to North Trinidad. And we do, because of our aging infrastructure, we have been dealing with the challenges and the lack of focus that has been placed in certain areas when we had money vis-a-vis storage. Our storage capacity in Trinidad and Tobago is very low. And also, as we have said before, we do have an aging infrastructure which has resulted in a number of challenges faced by WASA. That being said, WASA is putting they do have plans in place. We are refurbishing our wells, which we have reached a very advanced stage. We have refurbished over 45 wells. We have settled the system in most of the areas. Over last week, we did have some issues emanating from the penal area and in the central area. I've been in contact with those MPs. Those areas have settled down. We are increasing production. But we are managing that increase in production or that increase in supply of water. We have to manage it based on our long-term expectations. But about 2 weeks ago, we were down to about 50 million gallons coming out from our Caroni water treatment plant. Now we are back up to around 60, 62. So we are putting a little bit more water in the system based on the rainfall that has happened recently. And therefore, we expect that the impact on the population will be a little bit less. It continues to be challenging. We continue to ask the population to exercise, to conserve water as much as possible. That is, still I'm getting reports from a number of people who have water and they are still using their hoses, washing down the garages and so forth, whereas there continue to be people in the country without water. There is one pool of reserve water there. Our distribution system doesn't allow us to be able to move the water around as we would like to. Those are challenges that we have in the system. And therefore, the individuals who are getting water on a more regular basis, we are asking them to conserve water as much as possible to allow us to be able to meet the demand for water there. We do have emergency systems in place, which allows for us to meet the shortfall from schools, hospitals, etc. I continue to liaise with my colleague in the Ministry of Education, and we have not seen any major impact on the closures of schools as a result of water. Hospitals continue to get water. But so we have this situation, I think with WASA, we have this situation well at hand. We are not, it is still considered in my mind to be a critical situation and is one that needs to be closely managed and one of which I am closely managing, and I know the individuals at WASA are closely managing. But we require the assistance of the citizens of the country with regard to exercise prudence as they use their water so that we would be able to get over this drought that is not only prevalent in Trinidad and Tobago, but is actually prevalent throughout the Caribbean.
Thank you very much, Minister LaHunt. Members of the media, public of Trinidad and Tobago, I have been asked by Cabinet to come here today and to provide information with respect to the award and execution of a certain contract that raised red flags when it became apparent that this contract had been executed. It is a contract between Novo Technology Incorporation Limited, I repeat, Novo Technology Incorporation Limited, and the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago Limited for the installation of an automated passport control kiosk and e-gate system at Piarco, at both the Piarco and the ANR Robinson International Airports. So this is a company called Novo Technology Incorporation Limited. A couple months ago, the Minister of Works and Transport, under whom the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago falls, had cause to raise issues with the Minister of Finance, and these issues were really related to the financing and the payment for the contract between the Airport Authority and Novo that I've just referred to. As a result of this, Cabinet, the Minister of Works and Transport, had asked the Minister of Finance at the time to send in the Central Audit Committee into Airport Authority, this is a few months ago, to take a look at the whole procurement and the tendering process as to how this contract came into being. Coming out of that, there were further discussions, and Cabinet, maybe about a month ago or just over a month ago, took a decision to appoint a sub-cabinet committee with the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Works and Transport, and myself as the Minister of National Security, to again take a look at the documentation that existed surrounding the entering into of this contract between Novo Technology Incorporation Limited and the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. And after that Cabinet subcommittee of Ministers Sinanan, Imbert, and myself took a look at it, we made certain recommendations to Cabinet which have been accepted. But I need to provide the citizens with a contextual background with respect to the concerns we had related to the entering into of this contract. Those who have traveled through Piarco may have seen these kiosks, and I think there was a launch of the kiosks in December. Well, it couldn't have been December last year. It might have been sometime last year, because it was prior to me coming in as Minister of National Security, which would have been in August last year. And these kiosks have been there in the immigration hall. They've been utilized on a voluntary basis. When we've taken a look at it, we recognize that this contract was entered into between Novo Technology Incorporation Limited, Airport Authority. Based on the information that was presented to this sub-cabinet committee, there was a contract which was first entered into on the 15th of December 2017. There was then a supplemental contract that was entered into in March 2018. And the circumstances surrounding the entering into the initial contract in December 2017 and then this strange supplemental contract in March 2018 merit urgent investigation. In particular, we were very concerned to inquire into the process by which this contract was awarded and the terms that were agreed. When we looked at the terms of the contract entered into, and worse yet, the supplemental contract that was entered into March 2018, I'd like to say a few things. These never came before Cabinet. So the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago had no idea that this contract was being discussed or that it was actually entered into firstly in December 2017 or that it was supplemented. There was a supplementation to the contract in March 2018. So the contract did not come to the attention of Cabinet. I had outlined very briefly how the Minister of Works and Transport brought to the attention of the Minister of Finance, and that was really an aspect of payment for the very onerous terms of this contract that I'm now about to tell you all about. The first concern we had is that the award of the contract does not appear to have followed the usual tender process provided by the tender rules and procedures of the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. Remember, this is leading up to December 2017. But instead appears at highest to have been procured as a result of a selective tendering process. And there are provisions in the tender rules and procedures for selective tendering processes to be utilized. However, it is felt that in these circumstances, there's some concern surrounding the circumstances under which the selective tendering process was utilized. So that's the first issue that we had with it. The second, which is of great concern to us, because we see our job as being the protectors of the taxpayers and the protectors of the public purse and treasury, are the terms, the payment terms under which it was agreed between Novo Technology Incorporation Limited and the Airport Authority for the entering into this contract. The payment terms are as follows. Regardless of the number of passengers that pass through Piarco on a monthly basis, the Airport Authority entered into a contract that binds them to a minimum, a floor of 100,000 passengers a month at a price of $5.10 US per passenger. So if 60,000 passengers come through Piarco on a monthly basis and utilize the machine, it is irrelevant. If none utilize the machine, it is irrelevant. The terms of the contract state that the minimum payment to be made to Novo Technology Incorporation Limited on a monthly basis is $510,000 US dollars, based on 100,000 passengers as a floor minimum at $5.10 US. What we saw at the committee level, and we've advised Cabinet, when the documentation was looked at, it appeared during the presentation stage, the presentation was that it would be per passenger. So a figure, a payment per head of passenger that utilizes it, what comes through Piarco. How you then move from that to a minimum of 100,000 passengers at a fixed price over the term of a 7-year term of a contract. So when you do the mathematics, 510,000 US per month for a 7-year period, it works out to roughly 43 million US dollars for a 7-year period. We have serious concerns with the expenditure of this sum of money, the taxpayers' money. It is not even a contract that is styled in the way that you would expect, that over the life of the contract, the price per passenger goes down, because it is the same technology being used, the same kiosks being used. It stays fixed at a minimum of 100,000 at $5.10 US a month, which works out to 42.8 million US dollars over a 7-year period. As the committee that took a look at it, we advised Cabinet that that is unacceptable. What is even more disturbing about the terms of the contract is the airport authority does not get the property. So even after payment for 7 years, by that time it is arguable that that technology is outdated, the kiosks are outdated, we don't even own the kiosk. We don't even own the proprietary rights to the programming for use of kiosks. There was not, it also wasn't put in place an interconnect between the kiosk and our immigration system, which is where national security becomes involved. So these are some of the issues that bothered us tremendously. Also, one of the most astounding things is that the airport authority did not have anything in place to cover the financial payments. As you can work out very quickly, the payment of 500,000 US dollars a month, 510,000 US dollars a month, is just over $3 million a month, Trinidad and Tobago dollars, over that amount, to be paid every month. So you're looking at almost 40 million Trinidad dollars, depending on the number of passengers, but at a minimum, you're looking at 510 multiplied by 12, that is just over 6 million US dollars, multiplied by, say, 7, that's 42 million Trinidad and Tobago dollars a year, a minimum of 100,000 passengers a month. The airport authority did not put in place any financial arrangements for the payment of this. So how it actually came to the Minister of Works' attention, the terms of this contract, is when they approached the ministry, their line ministry, the Ministry of Works, for assistance with making the payments. Minister of Works then went to the Ministry of Finance, and this is when it started to unravel and come under our microscope. It had been proposed that there would be an increase or input of an airport tax to cover this cost per passenger. However, by this time, the contract had not only been entered into, the equipment had been delivered, the equipment was at Piarco, the legislation was not in place for the utilization, to make it mandatory for the utilization of this equipment. So when that sub-cabinet committee started to look at all of these things, and we called for the documentation, the contracts, the correspondence surrounding the procurement of this contract, how it was tendered or not tendered as the case may be, we became very concerned. As a result of that, this team that was appointed to review the contract that I've referred to came to Cabinet and made certain recommendations. And Cabinet has today approved these recommendations and confirmed them. And these are now the recommendations of the Cabinet Committee that Cabinet have accepted today, and this will be the process going forward with respect to this contract. We advise that the Ministry of Works and Transport seek and obtain independent legal advice on the contract between the Airport Authority and Novo, and in particular the legal obligations of the Airport Authority and the state. I can tell you all that legal advice is being procured. The process has started. In fact, yesterday the Minister of Works and Transport and his legal people and myself met with the independent counsel who has been retained to advise the state in this circumstance. We are also, as I had mentioned a short while ago, the Ministry of Finance had sent in the Central Audit Committee to take a look at the circumstances surrounding this or what they could find. That Central Audit Committee report will come back to the committee of the Minister of Works and Transport, the Minister of Finance, and myself for us to take a look at it, to look at the findings and see what further recommendations we can do. Now, Cabinet considered that an appropriate investigation into all of the facts surrounding the procurement process and the award to Novo for the supply and installation of this automated passport control kiosk and e-gate system needs to be done urgently and with the greatest amount of expediency. And as a result, Cabinet have today appointed Justice Rolston Nelson, SC, former judge of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Cabinet has appointed him today as an investigator into the procurement of Novo, the circumstances leading up into the entering of this contract between Novo Technology Incorporation Limited and the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. And we are asking that he submit that report to Cabinet within the space of 2 months. We are also going to provide Justice Nelson with a junior of his choice to assist him in this exercise, as well as secretarial support from the Ministry of Works and Transport to conduct this investigation and come back to Cabinet with his findings and possible recommendations. So that is what I wanted to announce today. This contract between Novo Technology Incorporation Limited and the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago is going to be investigated by Justice Rolston Nelson, Senior Counsel, and we expect his report hopefully within the space of 2 months, looking into the circumstances surrounding the procurement and the award of a tender in a sole select manner to this company, Novo Technology Incorporation Limited. Thank you. At this stage, we'll take questions. Yes.
James TV6. I mean, the first question is it really that hard to find out who would have been in charge? How many people would have the authority to do something like this? Any contract has 2 signatures on it.
Well, obviously, we have all of that information, but we are not going to be the judge and jury, the investigator, prosecutor, judge, and jury in these circumstances. We thought because of the amount and quantum of money and all that I've just outlined, the best thing to do is to appoint an independent. I assume this Cabinet just took this decision today. I assume that once this decision is communicated to the board of the Airport Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, they will do what is necessary. The board that was in place at the time that this contract was entered into is not the current board. So that's an important point. So I would expect that once the Minister of Works and Transport, who is the line minister, communicates Cabinet's decision to the board, they will take the necessary steps, obtaining legal advice as to what it is they need to do, and we wait for Justice Nelson to go in and start to do his work.
Just to clarify, so this was no ministry involvement in this contract, right? It was just between the Board of Airports Authority and Novo.
It appears as though the initial involvement might have been through the Ministry of National Security, but there was no involvement, it appears, with the Ministry of Works and Transport, under whom Airport Authority falls. The jurisdiction is that of the Minister of Works and Transport.
Well, now, as Minister of National Security, you were not aware of the contract while it was happening?
Certainly not, no. I was not aware of it at all. In fact, I had asked the question shortly after coming into office, seeing the kiosk up at Piarco, and I called in immigration and asked them at the time, what is going on with those kiosks? And I now recall, I was asked to bring legislation on behalf of immigration to facilitate the use of the kiosk. But when I looked at it, the legislation that was being proposed would have made it mandatory for every non-national of Trinidad and Tobago at every legal port of entry to have this type of equipment. So that's when I called in immigration to say, well, look, what is going on? Where has this arrived, etc. Shortly thereafter is when the Minister of Works and Transport went to the Minister of Finance, as I outlined, and that's when we said, well, look, something isn't looking right here, and we began to look at it.
So there's no legislation right now in place for the use of the kiosk?
It's voluntary. So there's no legislation making it mandatory.
Okay. And, well, till this as this investigation is going on, what then? Is it still going to be used? Is it just going to be on pause? We're still going to have to pay $3 million a month?
Well, those are the questions that we need answered, and that's why we're seeking legal advice. Our position is that the circumstances surrounding entering of this contract look to be very suspicious. And at that stage, again, the airport authority is going to have to take certain decisions. We are seeking legal advice as to what it is we can do. I can add at this stage, having taken a look not only at the contract, but also the supplemental contract, one of the concerns is the term and condition surrounding termination. So they amended the term and condition surrounding termination to make it even more onerous on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So if we terminate the contract at this stage, we effectively have to pay the amount that they would have made for the next 7 years with some uplift over the life of the contract. So that is part of why we're getting legal advice, because these things just don't make any sense to us from a contractual point of view. Well, I don't want to say what is going to happen. At the end of the day, that's not a decision for me to take, but I expect the right decision to take. And the Cabinet's position, the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago's position is, there's a lot wrong with this contract. The terms are too onerous. The termination provisions have been amended to make it even more onerous for us, and we don't agree that the taxpayer should be burdened with this. So this is why we've ordered an immediate investigation and the seeking of independent legal advice.
Novo is a private company, right?
Yes, it is a private company.
So does this mean, as the owners of the machinery and I guess the software, did they have access to people's personal information? The people who use this, I used it, so, do they have access to my personal information?
So my understanding when that question was asked is they don't have access to it. It goes into this secure, I don't want to call it a cloud because I'm not quite sure whether it is a cloud or whether it is a physical server. But I was told, no, they don't have access to that information. The information just goes into there. But there wasn't any interlink then between that and immigration. Well, I don't know. I never use the machine. You use the machine. My understanding of it is when you use the machine, you get a receipt. And you then still have to take that receipt to an immigration officer. So your clearance into Trinidad and Tobago or return to Trinidad at PRCO is by the immigration officer, who then looks at the receipt and has to enter it into the immigration database. So my understanding when I asked exactly that question, because Minister Sinan and I went up to PRCO to do a security tour not so long ago, which is when I first saw these machines, the question, I said, well, why would people use it? Because in foreign countries, for example, in the United States, when you use a similar machine, you literally just walk through. You just show your slip and walk through. My understanding in Trinidad is no, there was a kiosk with an immigration officer now dedicated for these slips, and they still had to go through, albeit it might have been quicker. So what they told me is you avoid the long line, and I found that to be ridiculous. So people were using the machine, like yourselves who have used it, you get a slip and you get a dedicated line, so you may avoid the snaking line that everybody else is lined up in. That is what I was told. These are the things that baffled us. And as a responsible cabinet, we immediately said, well, hold on, we need to look into this. And that's when we began to see these things. And cabinet has today agreed to an investigation.
Can you say how much money we've spent? 2018 was when the contract was awarded, right? So
the contract was entered into in December 2017. I think the payments may only have kicked in when they started to utilize the machinery. I'm not quite sure on that either. So these are the things that we've asked. Rather than us get into it, that's not Cabinet's job. Let's appoint an investigator to look into these things. We have not paid, because we did also ask those questions, we have not paid the full amount of $510,000 US a month. Yes, so they are claiming we owe them.
And when do you think this investigation by Justice Nelson will be done?
Well, I am hoping that he will get his letter of appointment, have his preliminary meeting, all during the space of next week, and we're asking him to see if he can complete it within a 2-month period. That has not come up at all.
I just asked that because we're coming off of a major scandal of 1.5 billion in last administration and legal fees. We're
It
worried
certainly
about spending.
will, I can give you the,
Worried about spending too much money.
I can, one thing, one thing I can give the assurance of the public of Trinidad and Tobago is there is no way that this administration would be paying the type of legal fees that were paid between 2010 and 2015. I had done some of the work, and looking at that, you all would recall in the first budget presentation in October 2015, the Attorney General and myself spoke about what we had begun to unravel, and certain persons getting millions and millions of dollars. I remember one of the persons now, $1 million for a pre-action protocol letter, $1 million for a statement of case. I spoke about that publicly. It is nowhere near going to be those types of legal fees.
If we just use somebody from the AG's office rather than
No,
appointing
but
a
this is
defendant.
something that is very serious. This is something where you need someone with gravitas, someone who has experience, and there are going to be very few persons with more experience than Justice Rolson Nelson. You all would recall his history was that he came directly from the private bar, straight up to the Court of Appeal. He did not even go through the lower courts. And then after serving as a Court of Appeal judge for many years, the only other person that has that would be the former Chief Justice Michael de Labastide. And then after serving as a Court of Appeal judge in Trinidad and Tobago, Justice Nelson then went on to be one of the first judges at the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice.
I have a little question about the board and who would have appointed the board, if it's not this present board.
Yes, it was a PNM, this administration appointed that board, yes.
So, I mean, does this reflect badly on the PNM?
Well, no, it doesn't reflect badly. In fact, what I would suggest is the opposite, that this administration has always said that no one is above the law. And I don't want to make any premature pronouncements. So I am not saying that anything was done wrong by the board or anything like that. I'm saying that red flags have been raised, and the decision we've been taken based on what we've seen is, look, this thing looks as though there may be circumstances surrounding the entering into the contract that we're not comfortable with. Certainly the terms of the contract we're not comfortable with. So what does a responsible government do? Say, look, let's appoint someone with the right weight, the right experience to investigate it and come back to us. So I think it would be premature for me to say anything further than that at this stage, but certainly no, it shows that the government will not protect anyone. The government will send in an independent investigator in circumstances where we think it's merited, regardless of who the people or person is.
I don't have any more airport questions, but I was looking at other ports of entry, because there's a report that the Cedros seaport is still not functional, and the dilemma about whether people are going to come in and we're going to criminalize.
Well, I actually saw reports to that effect, and I've had members of the media messaging me about it, etc. The language you use is very interesting. The port at Cedros is completely functional. There are officers there, there are immigration officers there, customs officers there, the Coast Guard officers there. What you may not be seeing is boats that were accustomed coming into that port. You all would recall that I said not too long ago, we have taken a decision that we need to secure our borders. Securing our borders out on the maritime means that you secure your borders. And that's exactly what is happening. You can't pick and choose who is coming in, who is not coming in. That's not a decision. We said we would lock down, is the term that the lay people use, the borders. We gave certain instructions to our men and women in Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, and you can't have it one way or the other. 1 minute you're hearing, look, there's streams and so many Venezuelans coming in all over the place. We had to take a decision, and we had taken it to implement, and we bolstered it. We're utilizing as much resources as we have to ensure that our maritime borders are properly manned and patrolled. As I've said before, I'm also a realist and pragmatic. It is always going to be impossible. Trinidad and Tobago are islands surrounded by bodies of water to lock down every square inch. We're doing the best that we can. So I found it somewhat interesting, let me use that word, a neutral word, when I see 1 week the argument is, well, they're coming in everywhere, and the next week is, well, look, nobody's coming in. What's going on? But still the suggestion that there are illegal entries. Even with the illegal entries, we're doing all that we can, both in the waters as well as on land, to try and reduce that.
I mean, the concern is, I think what it would be is we would want the law to be there in a fair way that people can see. Now, my concern would have been that if the port services were being shut,
no, they're
if the
not.
police, okay, that you don't want to criminalize people by not providing
No,
them
correct. No, so
opportunity.
that's why I corrected that. When you say the port isn't functional, the port is functional. All of the offices are open. All of the officers who are there to man the port are there.
Do you have, okay, it was a kind of related question to the openness of our law enforcement. The Prime Minister gave a half answer to the thing about whether search warrants are needed, because we've had different cases. And there's the Prime Minister in question, PM question time.
I don't think he gave a half answer, but go ahead.
Yes. Well, he said that in certain circumstances that you don't have, the police officers don't have to show a warrant.
I actually saw an... sorry, you finish on?
Yeah, if you want to, like, give a clarification. I mean, like, if you heard a woman screaming for help and, you know, being butchered or something, then you wouldn't need a warrant. So if you wanted to...
I actually saw an interesting article in the newspapers today. I think it was a commentary or a letter to the editor. I'm not sure what it was, or an interview of Israel Khan, where Israel Khan basically confirmed that position. What the Prime Minister said, and he's 100% correct in law, it is not every circumstance that you require a search warrant. So law enforcement officers who are out there doing their duty, and similar to what you have just said, if you're a law enforcement officer doing your duty and there is reasonable suspicion to believe that a crime is being committed, is about to be committed, or has, well, not has been, is about to be committed, or is in the process of being committed, they have the authority to enter into premises and to do what needs to be done to investigate that and to prevent it, etc. Also, officers have the authority. They can ask any one of us, can I search your car, can I search your premises? And if once we say yes, and we consent it, that is done without a search warrant. But what it would be is the circumstances. And what I like to say to this, the Commissioner of Police said from the word go, I think it was over the weekend, if I remember correctly, on Sunday, that at the right and appropriate time, he will tell us all what the circumstances are, or were rather, surrounding that event that took place. I can give you the assurance, as the Minister of National Security, that there was nothing that took place in the searching of those homes in South Trinidad that had anything to do with the current corruption charges you see before the courts. Point number one. So all of the attempts by the opposition to say and to muddy the waters that there is some interrelation between the search of those houses in Gulfview and having a connection with the charges we saw being laid against Anand Ramlogan and Gerald Ramdeen, that is a complete lie, a fabrication of the truth. There is no connection between the two whatsoever. And I will wait. What I would advise you all to do, rather, the public, is wait for the appropriate time that the Commissioner of Police can say to the public why those houses were searched. And I will say this, as the Minister of National Security, there was very good reason for those houses to be searched. And I am certain that when the Commissioner of Police thinks it's appropriate for him to tell the population as to why it happened, you all will then be in a position to understand why it is it happened.
The issue with the borders.
Yes.
At the end of this month, government is expected to roll out the Venezuelan
Registration process
policy. In terms of the status, the system, and the specifics being ironed out, is everything in place for it?
So what I did is set up a committee. I am actually meeting with that committee in the morning. I've had a couple of meetings with them before. It is a multi-agency committee, as you would expect. So you have immigration, we have obviously the Ministry of National Security is driving the process. So I have the legal people there, the police, the Defense Force, the Ministry of Health. A number of various bodies have been meeting at the outset, said, look, these are the areas you need to look at. They are developed the draft form, these types of things. Like Cabinet last week approved us going with a blanket order so we can do the process rather than the minister having to sign each and every one. I'm getting an update tomorrow morning. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the update this week before today. But in my discussions with the two permanent secretaries at the Ministry of National Security, they seem well on the way to meeting that deadline. I mean, we have to meet the deadline.
Update into the figures for the infrastructure to put things in place?
Not as yet. I mean, I should start to see those things, I would expect, in my meeting tomorrow. So at this stage, I have nothing before me with respect to the cost of the exercise.
Minister, back to CEDRUS, you said it's not that the immigration office is shut down, it's just that the borders are being more stringently protected. So is it that the Coast Guard is now intercepting these boats and deciding whether or not to let them into the immigration port? Because there was some report that the Coast Guard had boarded a boat and took off 2 Trinidadians and sent back
let me ask you this. The Coast Guard are the ones who are they mandated to protect the borders out on the seas, right, on maritime borders. Let's suppose that there is a boat coming across with Venezuelans. Let's suppose on that boat, none of them have any proper identification or any legitimate reason for coming to Trinidad and Tobago, etc. But there are Trinidadians who are able to produce their Trinidad and Tobago passport. In those circumstances, I assume those are the circumstances where what you've just described as happening would happen. So in the immigration law, you cannot deny a national of Trinidad and Tobago, a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, the right to enter Trinidad and Tobago. That's very clear, except in certain circumstances. So if a national of Trinidad and Tobago is coming back and they provide they will go to a legal port of entry. If they be entering Trinidad and Tobago, they will not be provided with the go-ahead to make it to land in Trinidad and Tobago. That's what we have to do. We can't just let all boats coming. I mean, that was a complaint, right? And I'm saying it was a legitimate complaint. We have to make sure that illegitimate people are not coming across our maritime border lines.
So is it that the Coast Guard has the authority to not allow these persons or to turn them back? I mean, would they be working alongside immigration officers? Or?
The Coast Guard would have the authority to prevent the incursion into Trinidad and Tobago's territorial waters by anybody who is illegally attempting to enter into our waters. If we have nationals of Trinidad and Tobago coming or in our territorial waters, for example, with illicit drugs, illegal drugs and firearms, etc., the Coast Guard is the point of contact. They're the persons in law that have to make the interception, stop them, and then when they bring them to land, the police then take over the investigation, the charging, and the prosecution. So yes, they are the persons in law who have to do what they're doing. All right?
Mr. Lahan, when you came into office, you said that one of your things would be to get WASA to improve its the leaks that they have. Is it still that 50% of the deliverable supply is lost to leaks?
Well,
and that, how do you reconcile the number of leaks in the country and telling people that they need to conserve water? When you drive down the road, you see a leak.
Well, the reality is I don't say one doesn't necessarily justify the other. They're two separate issues altogether. With regard to the number of leaks, I could say that we have been making WASA been making a lot of progress in reducing the number of leaks. As of January, for example, we had leaks in South Trinidad. A lot of focus has been placed in South. We had about 600 leaks identified on records. They're down to about 120, 125 leaks. Bearing in mind, as I've been on record and said, you have to understand, because of the age infrastructure, you have about 150 leaks that comes on board every single day. In North Trinidad, it's a lot worse. We had about 2,200 leaks. That number is down to about 1,200 leaks. So over the period, a lot of focus was placed on getting the leaks down and placing that work in that infrastructure. I want to say also Now, when we talk about NRW, non-revenue water, we're talking about a large component about it is being leaks. But non-revenue water is the term that is used. It's really unaccountable water. So a lot of water, that's water that you cannot account for. So a lot of parts of that non-revenue water also happens when water comes into our own homes, and we ourselves have broken faucets, we have waters, we have things that are dripping, and so forth. That is also allowing that to happen. And finally, with regard to the reconciliation, yes, there is an issue that we have with regard to the infrastructure and trying to get that numbers of leaks down. And WASA has been working on that. And I agree, that's an issue, that's a legacy issue that we inherited. There is another issue. The fact is we do need to conserve water. When you look at our levels of consumption vis-a-vis what happens in other Caribbean countries, vis-a-vis international standards, for a number of reasons, we do need to conserve because we use a lot more water than is required internationally by those who receive water. So there are two issues that need to happen, and we need to address WASA's problem by looking at all the issues. It's not one problem. There are a number of them put together that needs to be worked on simultaneously.
All right, great. Thank you. Sam, just one more question. I don't know if you saw it because it came up while you were in cabinet, but the IMF made a statement today at one of their press briefings saying that it will update its outlook on Trinidad and Tobago. I assume it will raise the outlook from 0.3%.
I didn't see it, but what is it that they said? That they will, they just say they'll update it.
They said the economy has returned to growth, and it had started to return to growth since 2017, and it has recorded growth in 2018. And in July, they will update its outlook. So I'd like a comment from the government.
What I can tell you is that tomorrow there's a debate in Parliament in the House of Representatives where I am certain my colleague, the Minister of Finance, will provide the whole country with the necessary update surrounding what you've just described. Also, as you all are all aware, we have the mid-year review on Monday. So I feel certain as well that would feature in it. I mean, what you've just described is positive news. As a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, I'm glad to hear the IMF say that. But that's really the domain of the Minister of Finance. And he's going to have 2 shots at that cherry on Friday and Monday. So let's wait and hear what he has to say. Yeah, go quickly.
I was going to say on the question on the topic of Parliament, senators, it said that senators sit at the behest of the Prime Minister. Recently there have been questions of one of the PNM senators in light of Mr. Gerald Ramdeen having to demit office. This is Senator Dr. Lester Henry, because apparently he had been under a DUI.
Who is saying what?
Well, there have actually been memes on the social media.
Who produces those memes?
Well, you know, people are saying, people are sort of trying to make a comparison. But is it a valid comparison?
This is the Douglas with the greatest of respect. One cannot run, I wouldn't even say a country. You can't even run a parlor shop on the basis of what memes are put out. A meme is created by someone with an agenda. So let's start with that. So if someone wants to put out a meme, I mean, I am certain I am one of the most memed people that there is, right? So no, the Prime Minister is certainly not going to decide who he appoints in key positions on the basis of memes. But I can tell you from a common sense point of view, I don't see the comparison between someone who has been charged with drinking under the influence and someone who has been charged of being in a corrupt transaction or transactions and a conspiracy to misappropriate. I don't know what the sum is, but I know the legal fees were up to $1.4 billion, and there is an allegation or allegations of misappropriation of fees and payments of kickbacks, etc. In my mind, and maybe my mind is too simple, I don't see the comparison between the two whatsoever.
My final question, and it's a completely different topic. A story we ran yesterday, there are several private security firms who are saying that they have not been paid by the Ministry of Education, and they're threatening to withhold their services. But this is something that seems to be a larger problem. MTS especially is saying they owed millions from the Ministry of Education and your ministry, the Ministry of National Security. the immigration officers at the immigration detention centers have been calling me non-stop saying that they're getting late pays. If my colleagues will allow me, some people from TTT have been saying that their payment has been coming in late. What I want to know is there a problem, a larger problem in terms of cash flow into the country to pay employees, or is this a personal problem, somebody not doing what they're supposed to do?
All right, you all would have heard us saying as an administration over an extended period of time, from the time we came in, that we have faced a number of difficulties with cash flow. There is always balancing. The Minister of Finance on a daily basis starts off by being told what the current level of our overdraft is. I mean, a few times I've acted as Minister of Finance. You see the overdraft being up in the 90s. It means you can't cut checks. What you've described is also a problem that the Minister of Public Utilities has brought us on the MTS side. That MTS, there are sums of money outstanding to MTS by government, ministries and entities, etc. It is something that we're supposed to focus on. I'm a little disappointed to hear that that still exists. I don't know when it was you were told it still exists from the Ministry of National Security. But that is something that I, as the Minister of National Security, asked the PSs, and I actually brought notes to Cabinet to get the approval to pay sums of money to MTS. The security companies that are owed money by the Ministry of Education, actually today I can say that we took a decision at Cabinet to allow the Minister of Finance to utilize a significant sum of money that is available, that was available to MTS, of just around $100 million for the payment of those types of contracts in education. Right? So that sum of money is correct. It is first of all for the Ministry of Education, and then to pay contracts, some of which are security contracts, some of which are other small contractors, and that type of thing. So that decision was taken by Cabinet today. There continue to be, at times, difficulties with cash flow in the country. I will say that as the minister, the line minister for TTT, last week, I was very upset to receive a message from an employee of TTT to tell me that they had not as yet been paid. When I inquired of the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Communication, I was told that there was some delay with releases, etc. I hope by now that has been satisfied. And I'd like to say, I mean, I apologize to all those that suffer. It happens sometimes as well in the Ministry of National Security with certain employees. I'm told that it is really with the contract employees, persons who are on contract, and that, in my view, is an unacceptable position, because persons have their expenses. Some of us have monthly expenses that will come out of your account regardless of whether money comes in. So firstly, I'd like to apologize for the instances where this has happened. It is something that unfortunately is only brought to my attention, and I'm sure every other minister's attention, after the fact of it happening. They never come to you before and say, by the way, Minister, if something doesn't happen in the next 2 days, there's going to be a problem with the payment. No, it is always after the fact. And then, of course, as the minister, you take responsibility for it. So I apologize. It's something that we will work on and continue to work on. It, fortunately, I don't think happens every month. So I don't know what happened on the last occasion. Okay? Again, I did a tour of the Immigration Detention Center not too long ago. That wasn't, I'm not sure what is the particular complaint they're asking you. This is the same late payment that they're being paid lately. All right, well, again, I'm even more embarrassed because I am not hearing this from my ministry. I'm not hearing it from the Immigration Detention Center, but I'm hearing it from you as a member of the media. I will look into it and give the appropriate instructions, if the appropriate instructions are proper instructions to give. Again, I know the officers up at the Immigration Detention Center are contract officers, so it may fit into the category of what I've just said. The first payments that are made by the Ministry of Finance on a monthly basis are the fixed payments. So public servant salaries, payment of debt that has to be paid, otherwise the country goes into default, etc. There are then releases provided to the various ministries for other monies to be paid, which would include contract workers. Okay? All right, thank you all very much, members of the media. Have a good day.
Thank you.